Welcome, I'm Amy from amysews.com, and I am so happy you want to learn more about cutting fabric with your Brother Scan and Cut. It comes down to three very basic things. It is prepping your fabric, sticky mat, sticky mat, sticky mat, and using the proper blade. So we're going to talk about all of those today. But the first thing we're going to do is talk about prepping your fabric. There is no gatekeeping here. I'm going to share everything I know, and if I mess up, then I don't edit my videos. So I want you to see how it's messed up and how we correct it. But we're not gonna have any mess ups today because we're prepping our fabric correctly. All right, here are our options, and there's several options for prepping your fabric. And just because it's right for me doesn't mean it's right for you. It's just how I do things. You're welcome to kind of experiment on your own. The first and probably the easiest way to get your fabric prepped, especially when you're first learning, is using a fusible web. Okay, so Heat and Bond products, you can find them anywhere. This is the Heat and Bond Light, which is I love for my applique on my all my projects, including machine embroidery. All right, they do make a red label, which is a no-sew, which is fine, but you cannot sew through it or embroider through it. So the light is enough to support your fabric. Okay, so you can see I press it on first. I cut it with the backing on, fabric side down, and I'll show you that when we get to the cutter. When you put this paper backing next to your sticky mat, what do you think happens? This sticks. Or if you remove the paper backing, let me just get this off here. When you remove your paper backing, it should be a sheet of glass. If it is rough and dull, you've overpressed the web and there's no glue left, it may cut, but it's not going to be fusible. If it's loose and kind of gritty, it's not pressed enough. This is what you need to see. If you remove the paper, cut your fabric pretty side up, use a good chance that this web, if it's not pressed correctly, is going to stick to your mat, and then you have another problem. So of the fusible webs, there's also Wonder Under, Steam-A-Seam, Hot Fix. The Steam-A-Seam takes a little different preparation because it's a double stick or a double fusible. So any of these, the Heat and Bond Light, if you're sewing, Heat and Bond No Sew, Wonder Under, and there is something called Hot Fix, which is one of my favorites, but it's more difficult to find because it takes very little heat to make it work. So the other options we have is just plain old spray starch, right? Spray starch, you can find it in your grocery store, your mart stores, anywhere where you want to go, and it takes several coats. So you can see this is a little stiffer than regular fabric, but what you do not want to do when you are using a starch, don't spray, and then hot iron, and then hot iron, right? You want to spray, kind of rub it in, spray, rub it in, let it sit for a minute, and then press it. We have to get the starch to the middle of that fabric because the fabric has the warp and the weft. That tiny blade, that little X-Acto knife has to cut through here. And if that blade catches on a single thread that isn't fused or welded together, then it's going to lift off your mat, or it's going to tear, or you're going to have really bad results. So you can use just starches, but you're going to use 3 or 4 layers of it, and you want your fabric to be able to hold up, okay? The other thing that you can use is something called Terrio Magic. Now, my bottle is MIA. So Terrio Magic is a liquid starch, which means it comes out like almost like a half set Jello. I don't know how else to explain it. It's very gelatinous and gooey, but you can see it turns your fabric into cardstock, okay? So you can see the difference between spray starch and the Terrio Magic. I highly recommend the Terrio Magic because I know it cuts beautifully. You can find it in mostly independent quilt shops. You may find it in some of the bigger stores, but it's worth the search, and it's a tad expensive on the scope of things, but we've already spent $9,000 to cut out for fabric leaves. So those of you who sew and craft know what I'm talking about. So the Material Magic, the liquid starch, is really good. You're going to spray it on your fabric and it's going to have this gelatinous wet glue situation. I highly recommend a hair dryer, a light heat gun, or just let it air dry overnight and then press it. You can press it when it's damp, but it takes a little more time. But for those of you who want to do your quilt pieces with Material Magic, if you're doing needle turn applique, Material Magic is the way to go. It's no more prep than using regular starch because you're doing 1 layer versus 4 layers, okay? Perfect Sew has been around for a while, but I will tell you, it's getting harder to find. If you can find it, it's also a liquid starch. So that's what happens. These products are changing rapidly because of the chemicals in them, the way they have to be shipped. Some things they're discontinuing just because of that. They just can't. Certain states, mostly like Hawaii, Alaska, California, Colorado, some of the states are getting very difficult on what it can be shipped in and chemicals and use and that kind of thing. So I don't have a problem with that. It just, you may not have certain products in certain regions. So that's probably more the reasoning behind that than not. Okay, so we talked about prepping your fabric. This is the #1 reason things go badly or poorly, or however you want to phrase it, is when you're using a fusible web and you pull that paper off and it is not perfectly fused, then if you've overfused or underfused, then that causes problems with sticky residue on your mats, and that is not good. So let's talk about your mats. Like I said, there is no shame here and there is no gatekeeping here. My mats are a mess. They're always a mess because I probably use my scan and cut every day. And sometimes cleaning the mats just is a little more effort than I'm willing to deal with at the moment. So you can see this gold band here. Now this is for the DX models. These are for the models where the blades, where you do not dial the number. It's an automatic scan and cut. So these are a little bit of the newer ones. The mats will always say DX in the part number, okay? So make sure you are lining this up. If you have a mat that doesn't have that part number, make sure it's for the CM models of your scan and cuts, right? The ones where you dial the blades. So there's 2 different ways to do it. Now, so this gold one is considered the fabric mat. It says so right on there. Sorry for all the spinning. Too much stuff on my table. So it says fabric mat, and what it does, it has a fly paper consistency until it doesn't. And so you can see my fabric mats get used for stencil material. They get used for whatever I'm cutting, because eventually, and this is what, if the scan and cut has one fault, it is the mats lose their stickiness. It's the truth. I love my scan and cuts. We sell scan and cuts here at the store, and we have sold thousands of scan and cuts, and we know the mats lose their sticky. And so you can have a light tack mat, a standard mat, a fabric mat, and after a hard day's use, they're all the same stick, right? So let's talk about cleaning them and how we're going to re-stick them, because that is super important to keep your mats clean. All right, you can see my fabric mat is a hot mess. This is my favorite cleaner for that. It's called Awesome. LA's Totally Awesome. I get it at the Dollar General. Our Dollar Tree does have it. Use the yellow only. And I don't know what the magic is with the yellow, but the pink smells better, but it doesn't do as good of a job. So I spray this on and I let it rest, and then I just rub it off with a like a kitchen sponge, with the rough side of the kitchen sponge, because the most important thing with your mat, and you can see there's a lot of thread and stuff stuck to my mat. I'm very careless about it. This will cause hiccups as it'll almost like a skip stitch in a sewing machine. Your blade will hop over these threads and you won't have a clean cut. It's incredibly important to keep your margins clean. You can see how yucky my margins are. Like I said, I'm not gatekeeping here because your rollers feed through here and you don't want to get that all rolled up and into your scanner head, right? So my mat is sticky. It's not as sticky. A brand new mat is almost too sticky. When I look at this mat, you can see it's very clean. You could hear myself sticking to it. In theory, it'd be nice if my mats look like this every day, but they don't. So keeping a clean mat, keeping your margins clean are very important to have a very good cut, a clean cut with your fabric. This is the fabric that is just done with the Material Magic, right? So there's no fusible web on here, it's just fabric. When I stick this to my mat, I take my warm hands and I press it down. Now I can see right here, this isn't gonna work. So now what? So after you clean your mat, they're gonna have a little bit of stick, but not enough stick, okay? There's a couple products I like to use for a quick fix, okay? The first one is I spray the 505 adhesive, temporary adhesive, either on my fabric or on my mat. When you spray it on your mat, remember those margins are going to be a mess, right? So keep it out of here. You can build yourself a little frame, so of cardboard, like a picture frame that goes over your mat, so when you spray, it doesn't get in the margins. This is Sullivan's Quilt Basting Spray. Again, what part of the country you're in, you may find a different product. This also works very well. This is my favorite, but it's been discontinued. So if you have a Janome dealer anywhere near you, a Janome sewing machine dealer, see if they have any of this. I like it because of the low VOCs. It doesn't stink. It does a good job. But again, it's not shippable in some states. So that's why they're getting rid of it, okay? So you can either spray this, right? Now I'm just gonna spray the mat. See what I'm doing? Just kind of like little light sprays. I'm not like soaking it, and now my fabric will stick. When your fabric does not stick to your mat, what happens is it hits a spot that isn't stuck, it lifts up, and then it removes. It'll just bunch up and curl up into your scan and cut. We've all had that happen to us. Or you can spray your fabric like in a little spray box and then put your fabric down. And these temporary sprays don't leave a lot of residue on your fabrics, okay? So don't be afraid to give them a try. You might want to open a window. If you're sensitive breathing issues, then you know how to manage yourself with using different types of spray. So keeping our mats sticky, either with a temporary spray after you clean them. This product also, now this is a skinny pen, but you can get a fat zig pen. It's just ZIG. And when you take it off, you just kind of sponge it, and you can see like there's blue, like a blue glue that's coming off. You can glue up your scanning cut mats with this zig pen, let it dry overnight, and you will have beautiful sticky mats. And again, eventually they're gonna lose their stick. So when your mats are crazy looking like this, make sure you clean and get all this extra. This is leftover stencil plastic that's on here. Make sure you get all that off there, or your blade is gonna hop right over it and cause some issues. Now with keeping your mats clean, like I said before, all my mats are equally sticky now. I don't have a fabric mat in the sense that it's like fly paper, a standard mat, or a light tack mat for paper. The light tack mat hardly holds anything, and sometimes I find myself using a little bit of blue painter's tape to hold my paper in place on a light tack mat. So when you first open a mat, it is unbelievably sticky, almost to the point, I'll say this sounds really counterintuitive, right? Almost to the point that it's too sticky. And if you put any kind of paper on it, you're never going to get it off. If you're trying to scan something with paper, you're never going to get it off. So sometimes I just take it and I just blot it with a piece of fabric just to kind of lose a little bit. So sometimes over sticky is detrimental for papers, the paper parts of fusible webs, right? So I know this is so much to absorb, but we talked about the fact that the mats need to be sticky, whether you're using a temporary basting spray, a zig pen, or maybe you're a mat buyer and you buy a fresh mat every project, which is not the right way to go, and keep them clean, okay? You're gonna use starch, you're gonna use a liquid starch, you're gonna use a fusible web to get your fabric prepped. So all those little fibers mesh together and the blade glides right over them. So now we're gonna talk about those. All right, here we are at the scan and cut. This is my SDX 325. So I have the automatic blades, right? So I don't have to worry about dialing anything. If you have the CM, the older scan and cuts, and you have these dial blades, both of these carriers need to be cleaned, right? And what you're gonna do, if you have the CM model, you're gonna unscrew, expose your blade. Yes, it's sharp, and make sure there is no chips missing out of your blade. Make sure there's not a fusible web all kind of gunky up in here, especially if you cut a lot of vinyls. Pop it back in here. You're going to turn it all the way to 12, and then you're going to dial it back. With fusible web on the back, I usually cut around pressure at a 4, and then my blades around a 4, okay? And you have choice of purple or turquoise. I cut my fabric with my purple blade, which is the heavier blade. If you have the CM models, the deluxe models, the new ones with everything's automatic, you're going to do the same thing. You're just going to expose your blade. Just pull your little collar back. Make sure it's clean in there and make sure that blade moves. Oh, this is the perfect one. Let's see, can you see that piece of yellow in there? When I pull this out, did you see all the goop that's in here? This keeps the blade from spinning freely. That's why when I start a new project, I always check to see, is my scan and cut blade clean? Is it free from any residue, and does it spin? That's all scan and cut blades for all models. And with this, I'm just going to tighten the cap because it's an automatic blade. So they come with black and they come with tan. Originally tan was for your fabrics, but it is now for your thin stuff, your vinyls, your thinner papers, anything that is on a thinner side. Black is what we cut fabric with. Now, I also cut cork, I also cut vinyl, I also cut stencil plastic, I also cut crystal template material, which is very thick and sometimes gooey. So I bought myself an extra black blade with a holder, put a little tape over there so I knew it's my fabric. So these are just like your scissors. These are my craft scissors. This is my fabric scissors. It's worth the investment to do that. So I have my fabric blade in, and we're going to wake up the scan and cut. You can see she's waking up. And I have just a standard tack mat in here, and you can hear it's a little sticky, and for my mat, it's relatively clean. I do have some fabric pieces here, so I'll just try to lift them off before, instead of cleaning a mat, I'll go on a spree and I'll clean, I probably have 5 or 6 mats. I'll clean all my mats one evening and I let them dry overnight. But when you have little threads, take the time to kind of just lift them off with your little brother. Spatula, this was an add-on, right? The little toolkit, this little spatula is an add-on, okay? So this mat is super sticky, and I'm just gonna grab, let's see if it's still in here. So these are the leaves I was working on, and I'm gonna delete a couple, and I'm just gonna cut one, okay? So let's see if I can zoom in a little bit so you can see better. There you go. That dark gray spot is from my last scan, okay? So this is the fabric that I use that has just that Bacterial Magic on it. And if I don't think it is sticky enough, and I do a test, is it sticky enough? I'm guessing it's not sticky enough, right? So if it's sticky enough, not really. So I'm gonna use a little bit of basting spray. I'm gonna spray the back of my fabric, and now I'm going to stick it on. There we go. And I used my hands. You may have gotten like a little rubber scraper type of situation to kind of wipe across it. A little credit card works, but this fabric, because this doesn't have the fusible web, if I have a bubble like I have here, it's going to happen. That blade is going to catch in there, and we're going to be in trouble. Now, these are the blades that came with it, right? The black and the tan. Then we know this is the Game Changer. This is the rotary blade. And I'll cut one out with a rotary blade also. This is only for the DX series, the 325 and higher. So this takes longer, but it is a clean cut, and you don't have to worry about it lifting off the mat because it rolls over the fabric. It doesn't drag through the fabric, okay? So I'm going to say okay. I'm going to scan my background so I can see where to place my leaf. And you're going to hear a little cutting difference between what is, oh, my mat's not in right, sorry. Little cutting difference. You'll hear the difference between something that is prepped with heat and bond or something on the back than what isn't. So our leaf is good. I'm going to say okay, please select. I'm going to choose cut and hit start. So it comes over and it does a little plunge cut off to the mat just to kind of test the thickness. Comes over and tests the thickness on the fabric. I don't know if you can hear that. It's kind of grindy. And before I lift anything off the mat, I grab a corner, I pull it back. If it did not cut, I restick it and I cut it again. See how thin and delicate that stem is? Don't start there, start from the middle. Now this is the one that was treated with the Bacterial Magic. So it cut really nicely. Do I have a little bit of sticky residue? I do. It's not going to affect my sewing one iota. Touch it with an iron and it will be dry. So let's cut something now. I'm going to have to resize it because I cut a small piece. So let's talk about this. I can cut this paper side down, but here's what could happen. It could lift off the carrier sheet, and see how it did it right there? There's the carrier sheet. I think it's safer to cut fabric side down and mirror image your design, okay? If you don't know how to do that, and these are some of the things that we do at Amy Sews, is when we do a project, we go through the whole process of learning all the ins and outs of why we do something. So sometimes I say it's not about the project, it's about the process, although we do some really cute projects. When you could see me when I was in my chair, some of the things over my shoulders were some of the projects that we've made. We cut and do everything. We just don't cut fabric. Every other month we kind of cut fabric. So let's see, is that going to fit? Nope. So I'm going to go to edit, object edit. We're going to size it down because it's not an embroidery file. It's just a cut file. And it can handle it. Say okay. Okay. Please select cut. And it's stuck on my mat. I'm going to hit start. Now you're going to hear it's going to cut a little cleaner because I have the fusible web on the back. And it's just a leaf. I could have mirror imaged if I wanted to. Now, anytime this thing goes crazy and it starts to lift off, you have a pause button. Hit your pause button when it starts to act up. So you can make any corrections and restart, or you may have to restart over. Okay, again, I take a corner. Did it cut? It cut beautifully. Now, I did mirror image this because it's just a leaf, but if it was a letter, you're definitely going to want to mirror image it. So I'm going to take this blade out. I'm going to put my rotary blade in. This, and once you put it in, it knows what you are, what kind of blade is in there, so it makes decisions for us. So I'm going to use a piece of this orange that just has Material Magic treated on it because not everybody wants fusible web, but I want to show you the difference. So you see that leaf cut out pretty doggone quick, right? I'm going to go back. I'm going to rescan. I know where it goes, but I want you to see the scan part so I can see where it goes. So it took about, what, 30 seconds maybe to cut out with the regular blade. It's going to take a little longer with the rotary blade. And again, I make sure it's all smoothed in, nice. There's that little yellow piece of vinyl that came out. We were working with puffy vinyl in the last Scan and Cut project. All right, so I'm going to make sure my leaf is there. My leaf is on the fabric. Say okay. Now I'm not going to change anything with the cut because it automatically knows. So now it went to 2 minutes. Same thing. Now cutting with this rotary blade is a little different because it doesn't take a straight path. See how it goes back? Like it cuts and then it goes back and it cuts. It's re-spinning that blade. It resets the angle of that blade every time when it sews. So it takes a little more time, but if you were cutting out an applique quilt where you don't want any fusible web, you don't want anything. Now, by saying that, this has the Material Magic on it. If your regular fabric, unprocessed, I'm talking just raw, right off the bolt fabric, if your mat is sticky, this rotary blade will cut it without anything, without any prep whatsoever. So this rotary blade is kind of a game changer, but you can cut batting, you can cut felt, wool felt, untreated fabric, everything with the rotary blade. I just wanted you to see that it kind of acts up a little bit, but that's it. Resetting the blade, resetting the blade, resetting the blade. So there's no worries about it being torn and lifted off. So you can see right there, it's just changing itself. All right, so let's take a peek. And there it is. So using the rotary blade takes twice as long, but you do not have to prep your fabric. Yes, I know this is prepped. I don't have a piece of unprepped laying here. But that is all you need to do for perfect fabric cutting. So that's it. It's that simple. You just have to remember, sticky mat, prep my fabric, choose the right blade. So thank you so much for joining me here at amysews.com. You can see we have a Tea Towel of the Month club that has cut files and things in it, but we also do our subscription box. So I appreciate it. I hope you learned something. If you have any questions, you can reach out to support@amysews.com. Have a great day, because the more you scan, the more you can.